So I have a few things to comment about this location. So one is, when we were doing most of our work with the cottonmouths, we would go down that trail, walk along the beach, and we mostly worked places along the beach where there were nesting trees, generally to the west. So we do an evening's work, then we come back up here, and just in the sandy area just to the side of the lighthouse over here, there would be a little resident cottonmouth coiled up, just sitting out. I could see it every evening we came. And for some period, there were 2 of them. Also, when I first began coming here, there were pelicans and some cormorants, but I mainly recall the brown pelicans would nest in the trees around the lighthouse. And I have some paintings of the lighthouse where the pelicans are featured up in the trees. And so that was a marvelous thing. And the some of the other birds would also nest over in this part of the island here, but then gradually over the years that I was here, they shifted the nesting. They kept shifting the nesting further to the west. But the other wonderful thing, in my view, that one could observe when we would either first come in the late afternoon or we'd come back in the evening, is in various places in the openings around the lighthouse, you could find a large cottonmouth, either just slowly moving or possibly just coiled someplace. And one of the first times I came over and there was a large cottonmouth out during the daytime, Henry pointed to it. I think it was over here somewhere. He said, "There's one of your friends." Henry never liked the snakes. And he said, "There's one of your friends." And then there were various people, especially him, that would say that, the snakes were so large they looked like tires. And so, and that's an exaggeration, but from a distance, like from here over to Jane, when this was a little more flattened with the grass, or on the sand, if there was a large snake, you could see it from a distance, and it would look pretty good size. And when you walk down the trail, the cement pathway or sidewalk from the lighthouse down to the laboratory, often just either crawling across that pathway or coiled out nearby, down in that area, we would often find a very large cottonmouth. So as I mentioned before, just on the edge of this open area here, over there, there used to be a Gopher tortoise burrow. And we know that cottonmouths also use the same burrow because we would see them crawl in and out. And this is where we used to see the trackway of a large Gopher tortoise. Every morning it would be here going one direction and then back, and we never saw the tortoise. So the other thing I wanted to mention right here is when I became director, one of the things that Henry said to me was, well, and he insisted on this when he became director, every marine laboratory should have a volleyball court. So for many years, this was very clean sand. It was kept that way. And there was a net, and this was a volleyball court. Now, in all the years I was here, I saw these Gopher tortoise tracks and a few other wonderful things, but I never saw anybody playing volleyball, but I think it happened. Anyway, sometime after I retired from the directorship, I didn't know what happened, but obviously I don't think this is this is used for volleyball anymore.
So you mentioned the students being here. What was the student atmosphere like here when the students would come? Would they did they have a lot of fun staying in the lighthouse, or was it more serious? What was it like when the students were here?
Okay, I suppose that would depend on the particular group. As I mentioned, I'd have a small team of research people and maybe several students, and other than when we were actually out, working with the snakes, there were a lot of good times, funny stories. Things would happen incidental to the research, that was fun to talk about and to share. The student groups, I was not so much involved directly with them because they would come with a teacher or instructor and they would have their overnight and so on. But generally, I think, I can tell you two observations. I think that, first of all, when the students became immersed in what they were doing or what they were being taught, all of my observations would suggest that they were very interested. They were, stimulated to think about biology and about science. And I think, frankly, some of the things that they ended up doing or remembering were probably inspiring for them. So I think it's a very good side that has to do with serious focus on academic work, even though you're here at a remote field station. Now, in the in-between times, I know there was a lot of fun making, and sometimes some of the students would get into trouble because they would do things they weren't supposed to do. There was one time when someone who worked for us got into trouble because he was doing something he wasn't supposed to do. But generally, I think people had fun and good times. So one of the stories I'll just mention involves Henry and Frank Montero. Okay, so Frank Montero was a director before me, and they had rules for the students. One of which was if you walk into the water, if you're doing anything that involves work in the water, shuffle your feet and be careful about stingrays because a lot of stingrays around. And then another rule was on the other side of where we're standing at the boat dock, there's to be no jumping off the dock, and you're not supposed to swim in the little lagoon there where the boats are docked. Okay. So Henry sometimes complained to me that he would come over and there'd be a group of students swimming in the water where they're not supposed to, and Frank Montero would be right in the middle of it. So Frank was not following the rules himself, or at least he's being somewhat lax about it. Anyway, I think basically two things happened. I think students had a good time when they were here. I know that friendships were made, and a lot of people, bonded in various ways. As I said, I have a lot of really great memories here, being with Coleman, for example, and we just shared many things of personal nature as we got to know each other. So there was that, and then there was also a great learning experience. And for many students, they had never been to a place where they were this isolated, and they observed things about nature and the natural world that they never maybe even thought about before. And so for a lot of students that could be inspiring or stimulating. I know that a lot of students that come here years later, they talk about the great experiences, the fun experience they had, and how eye-opening it was to come to a place like this. So I think there was a mix of what happened. It was a very, I think, enriching experience overall for all the students that came. Now, some of the students maybe made really good friendships here, regardless of gender. And I'm sure that some of those were probably sustained in the future. I don't really know, but I suspect that's the case. And then there are the people who have come back years later, say years after they've had a field trip, and maybe they're a high school teacher, and they will tell the story about how they were very motivated to continue their education and to be a scientist or a teacher or whatever it is, because they were turned on by a field trip to Seahorse Key.
Thank you. You mentioned doing some repairs, renovations to the lighthouse, and I think getting some monies from the Lighthouse Association. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that you wanted to point out about the lighthouse that you conducted?
Okay. Well, what we did, I applied for and got a grant from the Florida Lighthouse Association. And I also came up with some matching money. So we put the money together and basically were able to take care of a lot of deferred maintenance with the lighthouse. So this was specifically, so only the lighthouse. What involved was the turret had a lot of things that, like you described, back then, people were not allowed up there because it was kind of dangerous. There were planks that were loose or missing, things like that. I think the door was a little funny. So, and there was, I think there was a piece of glass that was replaced. Anyway, they shored up the turret, and then people could go up there again. So that's why I was a little surprised to learn that they can't go up there now. I don't know the reason. Anyway, so that was shored up. They redid the roof. So there was a new roof that was put on, and I think some of the guttering is probably new. I can't remember now. They went along and replaced a lot of pieces of wood along the porch here that were loose or rotted. So that was all redone, and then the whole thing was painted. And there were probably some other things that I'm not remembering, but pretty much it had to do with the exterior of the building, with the exception of the inside part of the turret. So the turret was also repaired. Another thing I remember was they replaced the screening, and they repaired some of the doors that were either sagging or the screens had holes and that sort of thing. So that was kind of a really nice upgrade for the lighthouse. And I believe I have photos of before and after, and there were some substantial improvements that were made from that ground.
Do you remember what year that was, Harvey?
No, that's the one year I've forgotten. I can't tell you. It was probably around, let me think, 7, 8, probably around 2009.
Okay.
8, 9, or 10, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
It was 2 or 3 years before I retired, I think, from the directorship.
Well, are there any other snake stories or otherwise that you would like to share with us, or any other place that you would like to go?
No, I think this is fine.
Okay.
I have many snake stories, but anybody that's interested can look me up and
Okay.
ask me about them.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And we should Photoshop Pelicans coming in.